Good evening and welcome to the Leadership 911 When Crisis and Courage Collide chat series presented by the Relational Leadership Network. I'm Charles Jackson, the founder of the Relational Leadership Network, and we are thrilled to have you here this evening. If you're not familiar with who we are, we're an innovative startup connecting leaders and communities. Our goal is really simple, and that is to generate global impact by teaching people how to relate to one another, which is why I felt compelled to do something in the wake of what's taking place on the global level right now. We all know that the world is experiencing a state of emergency, but it's not just what we can see on the surface. You see, yes, there is a virus being passed around, but this pandemic has caused us to reflect on some things much deeper. Our values, status, our security. These are all things that are really under attack. And if we're being honest, for some of us, it's more frightening. So the question occurs, how do we respond in the face of a crisis? How do you really lead teams in what seems to be a domestic war taking place inside the workplaces, grocery stores, and in our homes? How can we ensure that employees are paid and businesses don't go bankrupt and safe practices are adopted, especially, I don't know about you, but there's no blueprint for this COVID-19 giant sitting on the bookshelf or in our closets at our offices. And quite frankly, some leaders are feeling stuck. And as a result, if we get stuck as leaders, our families, our teams, and society will be left paralyzed. So we want to rewrite this narrative of fear that's cycling through. And this series is designed to help you explore ways to maintain a positive mindset, develop a crisis management plan, and really find creative solutions. And together, I truly believe we can come out stronger on the other side. So to help us kick things off tonight, we have Bob Pragada with Jacobs Engineering. I'm going to welcome Bob on. Bob, how you doing this evening?
Great, Charles. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So Bob serves as the president and COO at Jacobs. He shared his perspective at things like the American Water Summit and been featured in Infrastructure Intelligence. But tonight, we're going to unpack how this crisis champion responded when COVID-19 came knocking at the door. So Bob, if you're ready, I'm ready.
Sounds good. I'm ready, Charles.
All right. So when I put out the information about this series and I told our network we were meeting with Bob Pragada from Jacobs, the first question I got back was, who is Jacobs? So before we get into the weeds of things, I'll start there. Let us know a little bit about Jacobs and what you do at Jacobs.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, welcome to everybody. One of the great things about these types of forums is it takes a conceptual kind of theory that's out there on how people are feeling, and it makes it real, and it humanizes a very challenging topic for the entirety of the world.
Yes, sir.
So it's great to be here. It's great to chat about things and understand other people's perspectives. Jacobs is a really unique company, and both of us really have the honor and privilege to work for Jacobs.
Yes, sir.
Jacobs is, like you said, its roots are in the engineering field. So on the surface, Jacobs would be classified as an engineering company that provides technical services, engineering, design, construction management to the government services world, as well as the infrastructure space. But if you step back and say, okay, that's what you read in a playbook. What does Jacobs do? And what we do is we provide solutions for our clients.
Okay.
And those solutions drive a whole variety of outcomes in the world. So two primary areas of focus in our business. And so kind of the other metrics are 55,000 employees, 30 countries, and all nationalities, races, gender, very, very diverse company from a people standpoint. And that's what we are. We're a people business, and we deliver consultancy services. So if you break that down, you say, okay, solutions, what does solutions mean? Two main parts of our business, government services and our infrastructure space, right? You and I know what the other names are for them, but if you kind of simplistically stay in that, within our government services business, which we call our critical mission solutions, we're providing technical services to some of the most advanced government-related matters in the world, such as national security, cyber, the aerospace and defense world, a whole slew of other government, the intelligence community.
Okay.
And what we do are technical services, scientific services, cyber services, and all around really protecting national security
Wow.
around the world.
Wow.
On the other side of our business, our infrastructure business, all of the roads that you drive in, the trains that you're in, the airports that you visit, we're involved with advising on those facilities, designing those facilities, program managing those facilities, and are really an integral part of kind of just like we're kind of helping national security. We're also in the days of the lives of people all
people
around
in
the
the
world.
communities all over the world.
People in their communities around the world. In that infrastructure business, we also have a pretty strong presence in what we call the built environment.
Okay.
So these are areas where we do advanced facilities. So we design and we build advanced facilities. The one that's topic of your conversation, Charles, is Jacobs is the leader in the world in designing and building pharmaceutical facilities that produce life-saving therapies and vaccines.
Wow.
And so
awesome.
kind of, and we're also in the middle of designing and building data centers that then create cloud storage so we can have virtual calls and computers and all kinds of other things too. So really any aspect of life that as we know it, Jacobs is kind of the technical solutions provider in that space.
Wow, amazing. And so with that type of robust work and portfolio and employees on a global kind of scale, 50,000 plus, the implications for managing something like a COVID-19 crisis, right? They have to be endless almost. But even before we get to that, because, you brought up something early on as you started talking about, just being an individual. But how has this COVID-19 crisis, how has it affected you kind of personal? Because we see leaders and we think they're invincible and we see them operating at their best. And sometimes we forget we're mothers, we're fathers, we're husbands, sons, daughters. What has been, maybe most challenging or brought some level of anxiety to you cut through this pandemic?
First is exactly what you just said, Charles. It's the safety of my family.
Okay.
I've got two adult sons, 20 and 23, so young adults.
Okay.
I don't want to make myself too old.
They feel like they're adults.
And I've got an aging mother, kind of the same, and I have a wife. I think of that whole population that I mentioned, I probably worry the least about my wife because she's here with me. But my sons one is in Philadelphia and the other's down in Houston. My mother's in Atlanta. And day in and day out, I'm kind of constantly thinking about their safety because you can't reach out and see them. Now we do a lot of virtual calls and phone calls, and they're fine and they're safe and they're keeping well. But I think that's kind of the immediate anxiety that I have.
Okay.
As far as the balance of the 55,000 employees that we have, that's a heavy burden to bear. But Charles, I think it really comes back to, the way you and I grew up in the military. And so when this all hit, and we all immediately went into action, and a day turned into a week, that turned into a couple of weeks, and the next thing you know, you're on 17, 18 hours of phone calls, you're not sleeping that well, probably not eating that well, you're trying to do some exercise, but you can't go on long runs, and so you're doing an elliptical on your patio. It's like being on deployment. And I didn't even and it was, and being in the Seabees, I went on deployment with Marines, and, you're a couple of weeks into deployment, and you don't actually think that anything's really changed. And the next thing you know, it turns into about 6-7 months, and you're like, okay, something's different here. But it's not the physical aspects, it's not the sleep. It really is the kind of the mental, the mental aspects of dealing with it day in, day out. Okay. But we're hanging in there.
Okay, perfect. That makes sense, and I'm right there with you with my family and my friends. Same thing, being separated from them, so I can relate to that. So let's get into how leaders can really respond, Bob, because during times of crisis, some leaders get overwhelmed and stuck. while others, they kind of get creative and, they actually thrive in these environments. And the truth is, there are some opportunities that we can leverage as leaders, even in the midst of adversity. So, how should a leader respond to a crisis?
Couple of main points on that.
Okay.
One is around, and I'll make it very specific to the current pandemic.
Okay.
But there's adjacent topics that could be related back, relational topics.
Okay.
With regards to the pandemic, we as leaders have to know that, yes, we have to adapt and overcome, but there are a set of standards and rules that we have to play by. And so in the case of the pandemic, it's, stay safe by staying apart from each other. And those are strict rules, and those restrictions shouldn't be taken lightly.
Right.
It's just like when we're in the military, when we're, on the combat field, there are certain rules that we follow. Now, we adjust and overcome, but there's doctrine that you follow. There's military doctrine.
Without question.
Without question. And I think with this pandemic, it's the same.
Okay.
There are rules. We need to follow them, and we need to operate within those rules.
Okay.
Now, how you operate within those rules is the impact that you have on your people. Mm-hmm. So, for example, so long as all of our people, and we've got to make sure that that's the standard, are operating within those parameters, then you put yourself in, this is kind of the counsel that I've given myself, and I learned just like you did at a very young age of 18, is then in order to lead, you have to be able to relate. And that formula is not the same for every single person in every single situation. So it's a high level of individual awareness and a high level of situational awareness, and then modifying your approach to those. So what I kind of do is I try to put myself in the shoes of the people that are affected, and then modify an approach to deal with what they're dealing with.
Wow.
Day in and day out.
That's really good, and I think that is one of the reasons why our network exists and why we do what we do, because the relational aspect from having those kind of tailored to the individual or the team or the location or the contract or the client, right, is not kind of cookie cutter. And so to be able to sit back and take a relational approach to what does this particular segment need, right, versus, hey, we're all doing this, hands down, no question type of approach. So that's great advice, that to be able to relate to the individuals and kind of the human aspect of being a leader. Sometimes we want to just lead with an iron fist, right? And in the military, we're taught that. But to be able to step back and understand that all leadership involves people at some point, whether you're with a big company or a small company, the company is the people. And so to be able to relate to the people, especially during a time of crisis, is going to be something that is going to be just a differentiating factor. So to that extent, when you are now trying to relate with people, I read an article that Jacobs on LinkedIn, the executive leadership, and I have insight to this, is, opted to take salary cuts. Why take such a drastic approach or, sacrificial measures? And how do, what's the reason behind taking a drastic approach like that?
Yeah, that's a great question. Look, we're a very resilient company, and our portfolio and our clients, we know, are going to not only need us now during the pandemic, but they're going to even need us more in the future. Mm-hmm. And you yourself said it, Charles, the value in our company is our people.
Yes, sir.
So when we started the pandemic, we started with the headline of, we're going to do everything in our power to preserve jobs.
Okay.
And that's going to take sacrifice on ourselves as leaders, but it's also going to require sacrifice from our people too, all in the headline of, we want to preserve jobs. It would have been the easy thing to do, would have been to say, hey, look, we're headed into a global recession. This thing is lasting longer than we expect. We want to take care of our shareholders. So start cutting jobs and cutting costs, right?
Yes, sir.
We took the opposite. And so not knowing, and if anybody says that they know how long this is going to be or the amount of impact it's going to have on the world, I don't know if they're actually being truthful. Because I don't know if any of us know. But what we do know is what we can control today.
Okay.
To do that, we felt like we need to set ourselves as the example. And if there was a sacrifice that we could make early to show that, hey, look, we're going to do our very best, that was the reason why we did it. And when we approached our board of directors that we were going to do that, this kind of shows you the strength of our board. The board said, well, and it was and I'm coming back to the military again, Charles. We have a retired 4-star general on our board, Air Force. And General Eberhard, after we'd given him the whole spiel, said, well, if the executive leadership is doing this, then the board should do it too. So our board took a cut as well. Wow. And was really kind of the leading part of, okay, we don't know where it's going. We want to preserve jobs. We're going to set the example. And therefore, if we're going to ask for sacrifices from our people, there's a foundation that's already there.
Yeah. So then it's safe to say that that type of sacrificial leadership is very infectious, right? Others want to now do their part and are willing to make those same sacrifices, even down to something as like PTO sharing or whatever. But it kind of builds off one another when they see leaders being able to take and make those type of sacrifices. So that's great, and thank you for sharing the insight on that. So there was a story in Forbes CXO that said a lot of organizations were not ready for like the organizational or logistical challenges with the COVID-19. Would you say that proved true for Jacobs? And if so, how is the company overcoming them?
Yeah, Charles, this is the part that still absolutely amazes me. We had disaster relief and recovery, emergency response plans, and we had the standards that were there. Historically, call it kind of the last 10 years.
Okay.
We really only utilized those plans very surgically, and it was mostly around natural disasters. There was a cyclone in New Zealand. There were bushfires in Australia. There's fires in California. So we would have to implement those plans as it applied to a natural disaster, right? Where the calamity has happened and you can see the damage and then you can respond.
Got it.
We took those. We didn't know that how that was going to apply to a threat that nobody could see and restrictions that we were going to have to follow that, I'm sure if you looked out of your window right now and you looked outside, the world, except for maybe being empty, looks pretty normal, right?
Right.
And we, in full transparency, we didn't know how that was going to work out. And this is the part that I was amazed at. We were able to, and I'm not making up these numbers, we were able to, in 6 days, take 55,000 employees and short of about 8,000, 9,000 employees that had to go to critical job sites or work sites, especially within our critical missions solutions business where we actually work with our clients
on site, on their location. Yes,
on site, on their location. We were able to take the balance of the 47,000 and put all of them into their home environment in 6 days.
Wow.
And so, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, what type of creative tools or technologies had to be implemented in order to facilitate something like that?
We were putting bandwidth circuits in place overnight. We were expanding our cloud capacity literally in 24, 48 hours. We were doing server networks. Because remember, a lot of our business we can do on things like Skype and MS Teams and other things. But there's a large part of our business, like 50% of our business is based on high-end design tools that require a lot of bandwidth.
Oh, wow.
And so we were able to put all of those things in place literally in a week's time. And it reminded me, and it comforted me that it was like a Marine expeditionary force, mobilizing on moment's notice. And going to an area. Now, we didn't have all of our racks set and our planes ready to go. But we stepped up, and it's a real testament to the strength of the company.
Right. And, to use that kind of analogy to stay with that, it's one of those things now that you kind of hinted to earlier, now being able to take that, what was in place as a response and kind of make it one of those things where we're always ready, right?
Yeah.
And like the Marine Corps, we're always trying to make sure that we are ready. So we're training in garrison, we go overseas, but we're always keeping ourselves ready. And, we pride ourselves on, that's the reason the Marine Corps is still around, because we're always ready to respond. And so now Jacobs is kind of setting itself up to be that type of same like force when there is a crisis in the world. So what are you doing right now? We have a tagline, challenging today, reinventing tomorrow. What is the company doing to assist with, cures, vaccines, and testing facilities? What is our involvement when it comes to those things?
Sure. So let me answer the question in kind of two parts.
Okay.
Right. First part is, and I'll come to the kind of the life-saving therapies, vaccines piece, because we actually do have a part of that. The first part is that as we're in the heat of battle, operating day in and day out, holding steady.
Yes, sir.
We're not resting on our laurels. We have now our highest end experts involved in a very, very innovative initiative right now called Now to Next. We do know out of a major dislocation like this that our end markets, whether it be the Department of Defense, intelligence communities, state, federal, public agencies, we know that their business is going to be significantly affected in the future. So what we're looking at is, how do we respond whenever we come out of shelter in place to what the new world is going to be like? And there are new markets that are actually being created today that we're trying to address how we can take our skill sets for tomorrow. So for example, this is kind of a segue into the pharmaceutical piece. We as a world, all of us here, and I'm not sure if we have people that are dialing in from outside the US, but it's a global issue, probably most pronounced in the United States. Our healthcare resiliency has absolutely been tested. We see the scenes of what's going on in New York City.
Yes, sir.
Same thing going on in New Orleans, Detroit, Chicago, all over. That healthcare world, we absolutely have to take this time and make it ready for the future. So what we're doing is we're trying to play that forward into that. Same time on the now piece is that we also know that the world is going to get injected with a lot of stimulus to try to get jobs back in place and to get the world moving again. We're positioning ourselves right now to make sure that we're there for our clients to provide those kinds of solutions. So that's kind of what the now to next kind of process is. On the life-saving therapies, so we've been in the pharmaceutical industry for 70 years. And so we've been working with our really key core clients that we've had relationships with forever. Companies like Pfizer, like Merck, like Eli Lilly, like Gilead. They've been in the news a lot lately.
Yes, sir.
And working with them on, okay, when the PhD scientists come up with what that DNA strand is in order to create the antibody to infect people for a vaccine, that's going to have to quickly be put into a facility, and the process around how you arrange the equipment, how you develop the fluids, how do you transfer the fluids in order to produce the drug or the vaccine.
Right.
That's where Jacobs comes into play. So we're kind of side by side with our clients right now, and as they're kind of adjusting, their development process, we're adjusting what that facility, what the physical infrastructure looks like to produce it. And so and I'm making this up, so this is not, actually probably shouldn't say anything because it might cause people to buy that stock, and I don't want to be a part of that. But let's just say, drug company X says, hey, we got it. And we've gotten through the clinical trials, and we're ready to go to mass production.
Okay.
And Jacobs will be right there, ready to say, okay, boots on the ground. Let's figure out how to most expeditiously get this facility built and ready to produce the vaccine, so we can inoculate 6 billion people around the world.
Yes, sir. It kind of goes back to that perspective piece that you and I were talking about before we went live, about how leaders can bring a different and fresh perspective to a situation like this where you can be feeling hopeless and you can be feeling down, you can be feeling like there's no way out, but the right perspective can shift everything. And you know, I've said it before that that type of perspective and courageous leadership has the ability to shift culture and climates amidst any type of crisis that should arise. And Jacobs, as a company as a whole, through their leadership, like yourselves, they're being able to do that and prepare us for what's coming over the horizon. So, and I'll kind of go there now. What do you see? You kind of shared with what Jacobs is looking at, but what's over the horizon for us? What's going to be the outcome of all of this? And how can a leader continue to, until we get over the horizon, relate to his teams and keep them engaged during this time where everybody is displaced and we have this dislocation that's taking place until we kind of get over the horizon?
You mentioned it before, Charles. You know, our mantra really around our whole new brand and how we create purpose in the world is around challenging today and reinventing tomorrow.
Okay.
Part of that is around having a positive influence in the world. You know, there's a lot of companies, you know, that's why we're even trying to drop the engineering component of our name, because engineering it infers that, you know, you give me a specification of what you want and I go design it and provide service, right?
Right.
What we have found ourselves in a unique position is that no, the things that we're doing are having a positive influence on the world, right? So now if you kind of put it in the case of current day in the pandemic, we do know this, is that this is not going to be a new world of post-COVID-19. It's becoming very clear that this is going to be a new world of living with COVID-19. Right. And so what do our airports look like in a contactless type airport facility? You know, what does national security mean when there are threats now that we can't see?
Yes, sir.
You know, we used to took that from the physical threat to the cyber threat to now it's the, you know, kind of the invisible threat.
Yes, sir.
That the delivery mechanism for that threat is us.
It's us.
Right? And so that's got a profound impact on everything that we do.
Everything that we do.
And so giving people that belief that they are working for a company and for people that are in the business of having a positive influence on the world.
Wow.
Is creating, I mean, it creates a lot of inspiration for us.
Yes, sir.
And so it's our job to make sure that our people understand that.
Okay. So we like to, in this last few minutes that I have with you, we like to close all of our segments and shows by asking our guests 4 questions that start with the letters that spell out the word lead. And I want to, you know, you've provided so much valuable insight. And so these quick kind of rapid fire questions, I ask them and you respond with sort of the first thing that comes to your mind. So if you're ready for those, that's kind of how we're going to wrap things up. All right. So the first is L. What have you learned, right? During your years of leadership, what lesson have you learned that's been the most impactful on your kind of leadership brand?
Know your limits.
Know your limits.
Understand yourself.
Okay.
And constantly be readjusting. Constantly be learning new things. Constantly don't get set in your ways.
Okay.
Always be looking forward to how you can be a better person.
That's really good. Set in your ways. I like that one. So E, expectations. What do you think is the number one thing people expect most from leaders?
To be human and to be relatable. You know, I think the core of leadership is to be able to connect with your people.
Wow.
And I think once you make that connection, you know, you can do great things together as a team.
Yes, sir.
And I think that's the biggest one.
You've been following our network, it seems, Bob. That's what we talk about all the time.
Oh, is that right?
So the A, acceptance. What should new leaders learn to accept when stepping into a leadership role?
that they're not always going to have the right answer, and they're not right all the time.
Yes.
Right? And I think they need to accept that the greatest quality of a leader is humility.
Wow. Wow. That's awesome. And then D, decision. Is there a blueprint leaders can follow when it comes to developing clear decision-making processes?
Go with your instincts,
Okay.
govern with your mind.
Instincts in mind. Now I'm gonna pause. I'm gonna write that down. Instincts in mind. It's recorded, but I want to write that down.
Got it.
That's good. That's
So
that's one of those blueprints where it's simple.
I actually learned. Remember, I talked about learning.
Yes, sir.
I didn't get to that part. Actually, in full transparency, I wasn't expecting that's how the last part was going to go. So this is a good learning experience for me as well.
Yep. So the first three are kind of straightforward. Then that last one, you're like a blueprint. But oftentimes leaders think they have to say step 1, step 2, step 3. But no, it really just comes back to how you carry yourself, your morals, what your convictions are, right? So if it's my mindset, and I'm remaining humble, that's a blueprint, right? Because everything else just kind of flows from that. So I thought that was a great answer, one of the best ones that we've gotten. So I really appreciate that. So Bob, I know you got to go. Your time is valuable, but I do appreciate you stopping by this evening. This has been a great time with you. I've learned so much. I know our viewers have. You brought so much value to their lives. And I hope everyone has enjoyed this session. This is just the beginning of what's going to be a 6-week series. And so join us next week. We're going to help you find happiness in the midst of chaos. We got a great guest coming by. And trust me, you don't want to miss any part of this series. And until next time, guys, just stay strong, stay positive, and together, if we stay connected, we can get through this thing. So thanks, Bob, for having us. Thank you for everyone who joined.